We welcome you to the second talk about the history of San Ramon, the town that you chose, which you have honored us by sharing with us in Costa Rica, and where we hope you feel very comfortable. Today we are going to continue the theme that we started last week. Let's remember a little. We talk about how the first pioneers ventured into these wild forests that existed at that time in the western part of Costa Rica's Central Valley, how they settled here, struggled against all odds to provide for their families. Then their pleas, their requests, were answered by the government of the state of Costa Rica, and that is how, on January 19th, 1844, the true dream began, which was a decree through which the town of San Ramon de los Palmares was founded. Well, there we talked about how we believed this was a project. We explained why we believe it, provided the necessary information, and explained in many ways how all the facts of philosophy, that of utopian socialism, led to this project. Now we're going to talk a little about what happened afterward. Well, let us remember that the decree spoke of 5 years in order to favor the people who arrived to settle in that period. Well, what happened in those 5 years? They were not easy. They were difficult years. First, like everything, it was not that immediately the area was measured and everything prepared, but that took its time. 2 or 3 years later, the neighbors were still begging for the people who had to carry out the work according to law approved in 1844 come. And so it was. Finally they came. The dense jungle in which the inhabitants lived began to undergo some changes for the benefit of the inhabitants. We have a fact that is important. It must be said, in the year 1843, a year before the town was founded, the people of Ramon had already done something that marks, that indicates what their vision of community was. That year, without the support of any government, any Ministry of Education, or any state institution, they organized themselves and founded a little school, a small school that was located in the middle of the jungle. There, a teacher, a barefoot man, a simple man named Felix Fernandez, was teaching 28 children. Well, this might seem little nowadays, but it was not that little. Imagine this. In that small Costa Rica 186 or 188 years ago, the literacy was a norm, not the exception. At that time, Costa Rica had 98% of literacy. The school population in the main population centers of the country, which were Alajuela, Cartago, Heredia, and San Jose, barely reached 200 children. So, for 28 children in this jungle to be receiving their first letters, learning to read, learning some math and geometry, all of this is very significant. That marks the way. That shows what the intention of those pioneers was. Barefoot men, simple peasants who settled here and committed to education, to work, as part of the vision of the community they were beginning to build. And that was a clear signal. It marked a path that is still followed in our days. The heroic feat of teacher Felix Fernandez made education the main activity of this town. Not long after, it was already noticeable what the intention of those settlers was. Simple people, most of whom didn't even know how to read or write, but they bet that their children had to do so. And this is how, in the 1850s, 6 years after the founding of the town, not only had there been a noticeable population growth, but education was already more widespread. Our historians of that time narrate that by 1854 there were 4 schools, small schools, little schools, but schools that represented that sentiment, that desire to be better. Around 1854, what we could call, the seat of the current municipality was created in San Ramon. The local government was established under a decree and authorized to form what at that time was called the Council of Proprietors. The Council of Locals was a collegiate body composed of 3 mayors, a civil mayor, a mayor related to judicial matters, and another mayor who we could call a justice of the peace, who was a kind of arbitrator in some communal matters. These three constitutional mayors made up, as we called it, the council locals, and they themselves were responsible for appointing the political chief, who was the highest authority in that town. This is how a political chief named Daniel Castillo was appointed. As a historical curiosity, 15 days after being appointed, he suddenly died. Daniel Castillo was in his position for a short time, as he passed away unexpectedly, but that did not stop the townspeople. The council of propios continued, and San Ramon entered institutional life in a secure way. That decade from 1850 to 1860 was very important because San Ramon was no longer only made up of that group of pioneers, but prosperity, the availability of resources, and the conditions created by the founding project were attracting more people. Among them came important personalities, educators, and men connected to the government who came to live in San Ramon. Then San Ramon enters a higher form of organization. It is no longer just those visionary peasants, simple people, but also people who have a higher intellectual and educational level begin to arrive. That was an important resource that San Ramon acquired in those first 10 years of its foundation, and it is precisely that resource that takes them on a path of progress. Education is the first step. By 1860, San Ramon already had 6 or 7 schools, and Dona Joaquina Rodriguez, a distinguished neighbor of this town, had already established a private little school. Dona Joaquina was a widow. She arrived in San Ramon with 4 small children, and the way she fed them and provided them with a roof was by setting up a small school that, like the teacher Felix Fernandez, had a very peculiar characteristic. Since it was a communal effort, the children who attended these schools were the ones who paid the teacher. But the payment was very charming, very unique. Many children would come and give the teacher a dozen eggs. Others brought a little bacon because their parents had slaughtered a pig. Others brought a sack of corn. And that is how, within that supportive San Ramon, where people lived a lot on exchange, where neighbors gifted each other food and received food, they invested in education in such a simple and beautiful way that even to this day it draws attention. And so the years passed. It is logical. Within an educational process in which people believe in what they're doing, education becomes or transforms into culture. The young settlement became a place where culture was expressed. And let's move the clock forward a bit. Around 1870, the priest who led the parish of San Ramon, Joaquin Garcia Carrillo, published a literary text known as the Testament of Judas. It was a satire of the wealthy people of the town, as it was in the midst of a dispute over construction of the church. Some wanted it to be made of wood because they owned sawmills, while the priests wanted it to be built with the most modern techniques of the time, stone and lime mortar, as that technique was called back then. In the middle of that dispute, the priest and several leading people of the town made that publication, which is known as the first Costa Rican literary text. Imagine for yourselves the importance of this insignificant and tiny village, which suddenly gives rise to the first known literary text in Costa Rica. 2 or 4 years later, historians differ on the exact date. A very important national figure arrives in San Ramon, Julian Bolio Llorente. Don Julian Bolio Llorente arrives in San Ramon exiled due to political problems with the then President of the Republic, Tomás Guardia Gutierrez. Don Tomás sends him to San Ramon, and being Don Julian a person who could possibly have become President of the Republic, a brilliant lawyer, former President of the Supreme Court, former Deputy and former Minister of Education, he possessed enormous prestige. That is why they came with him to San Ramon, between 30 and 40 families who self-exiled along with him. Among them were very important personalities, artists, people who played the piano, people who knew about music, and educators with a more solid background. So what happens in San Ramon is what I like to call the golden stage, the magical era of Ramonen's culture. Don Julian Bolio finds in San Ramon a very important figure. Our first municipal president, around 1877, Juan Vicente Acosta Chavez. Don Juan Vicente Acosta Chavez was a merchant who traveled to Europe to bring merchandise for the store he had. So he fell in love with European culture, or at least he came to know it deeply. And besides merchandise, he also brought books. So when Don Julian Bolio arrives in San Ramon and meets Juan Vicente, he becomes his natural ally. Don Juan Vicente and Don Julian gather a number of important people, many from San Ramon and many who came with Don Julian, and establish a true crusade for culture. At that time, in that small town with mud streets and straw roofs, where people walked barefoot to the mud in winter and through the dust in summer, Don Julian Bolio established an academy of jurisprudence. Lawyers graduated from there around 1876. Together, Don Julian, Don Juan Vicente, and that great group of people from San Ramon, some in Hart and others at the Naval, as we usually say, established things that still surprise us today. In 1879, they founded the first public library in Costa Rica in San Ramon. It sounds ambitious, and it was not a tiny or poor library. It was a library full of works of universal literature, the best literature in the world in 1879. Don Juan Vicente brought it from Europe. So it is not surprising that in those years Lysimaco Chavarria, our first and greatest poet from San Ramon, emerged, because books produce culture, produce education, produce the arts, and many of the good things that fill the spirit. So Don Julian and Don Juan Vicente had that brilliant idea of creating a public library. And that library came to have close to 1,300 volumes at that time. It was a considerable collection, especially because it was the largest in the country, practically the only one. In addition, it operated with a membership system where practically all the heads of households in the town were registered or affiliated. In a population of 2,800 people, 300 were members. That is, all the families had a connection with the library. That sets apart what San Ramon was going to be, which we still know today. You know, you are around here, and if you don't know it, we tell you that San Ramon has always been known as a land of poets, musicians, and presidents. Literally, we can tell them that people, in those times of mud and dust, walked reading through the streets. The book was the best friend of the people of San Ramon. Men and women immersed themselves in the library. The library became so good that I am going to tell you an anecdote. In 1881, the second bishop of Costa Rica, Bernardo Augusto Thiel, of German origin, arrived in San Ramon. The people of San Ramon, very enthusiastic, took him to see the library. The bishop entered and, according to those who saw him, practically ran out. When someone asked him what he thought of the library, he replied, "There are some good books, many bad ones, and most are entirely pernicious." Of course, this was because it was a time when the Catholic Church prohibited a large part of reading. Very few books were recommended by the Church. That explains the commotion and why the bishop practically ran away. The library closed due to this meeting with the bishop, but the books continued circulating throughout San Ramon. The whole town was considered their home. People kept reading, and the book continued producing that great effect on the population of San Ramon. To continue with this conversation, we must tell you that time is short, the topic is long. We are going to try to give you an idea of what the cultural, economic, and historical development of San Ramon has been. We have already told you about Don Julian Bolio. We have told you about the library, but we have to tell you that in this country, we are a very civilist country. This does not mean that we have not had our differences, and we have even resorted to using weapons in those differences. Fortunately, these are neither frequent nor very dramatic. But since the founding of San Ramon, we have had 4 events of great relevance. The first is a national campaign between 1856 and 1857, in which the entire country had to take up arms against an invasion that came from the United States, specifically from the southern states, where the pro-slavery sectors sent expeditions with the purpose of taking over 5 Central American countries. These expeditions were led by an adventurer named William Walker, who eventually died by a firing squad in Honduras and caused a lot of pain in these lands. Costa Rica, we are talking about a country of about 100,000 inhabitants, barely had that population in that year, and we lost around 2,000 people in the battles. But not only that, those battles were resolved in a very unpleasant way. The filibusters threw their dead, threw the corpses into the water wells, and that caused a cholera epidemic that alone in Costa Rica took the lives of 10% of the population. Well, this was the war. In the end, we defeated them, but Costa Rica fought its definitive war for independence in 1856 and 1857. The people from Ramon played a very important role. Being a small settlement, a new settlement, they participated in the armed actions. They were the scouts who carried supplies, food, etc., to the San Juan River, which was where the filibusters entered, and they had the food, etc., and they managed to take that means of communication. So the participation of the people from Ramon was frontline in that decisive battle in Costa Rica. In 1919, we emerged from a cruelest dictatorship in our history. We had a dictator between 1917 and 1919 named Federico Tinoco, and we managed to remove Federico Tinoco from power through a revolution led by the people from Ramon, whose leader was Julio Acosta Garcia, coincidentally the son of Don Juan Vicente, whom we mentioned earlier in the days of Don Julian Bolio. Julio Acosta Garcia led that revolution and became president of Costa Rica. Later, in 1948, we had a very important civil war that ultimately resulted in what we know as the Second Republic. That civil war was led by Jose Figueres Ferrer, a person from Ramon, and alongside him were many important people from Ramon, such as Don Francisco J. Orlick and Don Fernando Valverde Vega, in addition to many others. But these 3 have fundamental importance. Don Pepe Figueres was a winner of that civil war and was president of the Republic for a year and a half, between 1948 and 1949, establishing what is known as the Second Republic and building the Costa Rica that we all know as part of the reforms that another leader also established in that same decade, who was called Rafael Ángel Calderón Guardia. Don Pepe was president of the Republic on 3 occasions, and Don Francisco J. Orlick, who was a second in that revolution, later also became president of the Republic. That is why that San Ramon was given the designation of Land of Presidents, not only because it had 3 who governed 6 times, but because those presidents were decisive in difficult moments for the country. In 1955, there was an invasion from Nicaragua with the purpose of overthrowing the government, the second government Don Pepe, as Don Jose Figueres was known, and Don Jose Figueres put Don Francisco J. Orlick in command of the army that had to be improvised. It is necessary to add something very important to this. You know that Costa Rica is one of the few countries in the world that does not have an army, and that is the work of Don Jose Figueres and the Second Republic in the year 1948. So the people of San Ramon have been decisive in times of war and in times of peace. When it was necessary to promote culture, when it was necessary to put education at the service of the people of San Ramon, what they did was brilliant. And when it was necessary to take up arms to defend the homeland, they were very brave and very courageous. To continue, we must say that the people of San Ramon not only excel in education and culture, nor only in the military. The people of San Ramon have also known how to build a community based on very important institutions. One of them is the public library. For the people of San Ramon, education and the book go hand in hand, and that has been one of the most important achievements throughout their history. We have always had a library. We have always had the book as an ally. More than a rifle, more than the soldier, the book, that is our true army. I can also tell you that the people of San Ramon, since the 19th century, have excelled in music. Important teachers came. When Julian came, a Spaniard also came who was a top-notch music specialist named Alejandro Cardona, and Mr. Alejandro Cardona created a music school in San Ramon. To this day, it is a town that has stood out for the existence of musicians of all kinds. So presidents, poets, and musicians, with the Chavarria system, which was born at the same time as the library, we began a process of developing poetry in San Ramon that has been ongoing for more than 140 years. And that is why we are recognized as the land of poets, because of their quality, both men and women, because we have very good poets, both men and women. So we are telling you how we have developed institutions that are very important. Back in 1886, a citizen said, "We need a hospital." We didn't have Social Security like we do now. We didn't have a Ministry of Health like we do now. So the people of San Ramon organized themselves, and one gentleman provided a bed, another provided some sheets, another donated 2 pesos per month. The municipality said it would contribute 5 pesos, and the first hospital was built with the contribution of the community. Since that year, the hospital has been an institution present in all generations of people from San Ramon. Maybe for you, coming from a developed country, saying that we have a hospital is not something that sounds very grandiose. That doesn't sound very impressive. But in a country like this, since 1886, having a hospital set us apart from all the other towns. And that built San Ramon into a different place. Culture, education, music, and poetry also created excellent politicians. We already mentioned Don Pepe. We mentioned Francisco Orlick, your presidents, but the people of San Ramon became the quintessential politicians to lead this country for many generations. Another consequence of that attitude of the people of San Ramon to promote education was turning it into the main industry of San Ramon. The teachers from San Ramon were trained by the hundreds. The people of San Ramon educated the entire northern zone of San Carlos, the southern zone of the country up to the border with Panama. They educated the entire Nicoya Peninsula. The teachers from San Ramon were the most important people in all those small villages of Costa Rica. We have built a country from that culture, from that education, and we have helped Costa Rica to develop. The contribution of the people of San Ramon is immense. And let me tell you something. We have in the Legislative Assembly, in our Congress, a hall known as a Hall of the Meritorious of the Homeland. The title of Meritorious is the most important title given in this country. It is awarded to Costa Ricans who have given the greatest achievements to the homeland. The Gallery of Favorite Sons, or Meritorious of the Nation, which is in the Legislative Assembly, has more or less 80 of them. And let me tell you that the people of San Ramon have 11. That is something outstanding. It is something very brilliant, and shows that the sons of San Ramon are always in the first place within what is a gathering of the best sons and daughters of Costa Rica. Well, as I was saying before, unfortunately time has not been our best friend to work with you, to explain many things to you. We have tried to make a summary, a great summary of the history of San Ramon. I have had the experience of teaching a local history course at the University of Costa Rica in a program known as the Senior Adult Program. I have taught that course for about 8 years. And let me tell you that the topics I have covered with you in these 2 lectures are more than a semester's worth. That is, I have needed more than a semester to present that subject. I need to give a 2-hour class to explain the topic of education, another 2-hour class to talk about mining, which is an important activity in Costa Rica, and has promoted the development of that activity, which has also been a way to colonize other lands, to develop other parts of Costa Rica. A class is needed to talk about education. Time is needed, a lot of time. So today I apologize if it has not been able to be extensive. It is difficult. We are trying to give you a message because, as I told you at the beginning of this talk, for us, we have coined a term. One could be from San Ramon by birth. That is, from San Ramon by belly button, but it turns out that we believe that a person from San Ramon can also be one at heart. Here we have had many people who have come since the 19th century. I already mentioned, for example, Julian, but there are hundreds of cases. People who come, integrate, and give their life here to work in this place, and fall in love with San Ramon. Many have left and remain in love. So, that person from Ramon who is not from Ramon by birth is a Ramon native at heart. And that is why we value activities like this one we are doing with you so much. Because we are very clear that you are people who come here looking for peace, looking for tranquility, looking for a place where life is beautiful, is pleasant. But you are also people who come ready to work to make things better, not only for yourselves, but also for the community. That is why we enjoy being here with you today, having been here last week, and giving you this message, because we value people like you, and we thank you for becoming part of our community, because we will always be needing people like that. So now what we wanted was to introduce you to this town, to know that you come to a town that values you, not because you are people, some of money, others because you have very important assets. No, here people are valued for who they are, for what they do, and for the role they play in the community. And so we are attentive to finding groups like this and to telling them what we are, what we have always been, because that allows us to establish a parallel between what you're looking for and what we can offer. And I think these are things that in the end are the same. The history of San Ramon is a very rich history. I am available for you to ask me, send me emails, to watch videos, to give you a lot of information. Fortunately, the people of Ramon have had, since the 19th century, not only a library. We created newspapers. We spread culture through the written press. We have always had radio stations. We have always had people from Ramon concerned with documenting history. We have many writers. We have historians, many writers and historians who have left a record of what we are, and that precisely makes us a very rich community. Because, as has always been said, no people knows where it's going if it does not know where it comes from. And we take great pride in where we come from, in what we are. We like to share it. We are greatly pleased when we feel that people who come to settle with us value the same things that we do. That is why today, as I was saying, I regret not being able to give you a very extensive explanation, not having gone into many topics, but I do want to make it clear that the people of Ramon have been a community since its founding, and let us remember that we believe it was founded as a project in which great importance was given from the first day and a little before to education. This generated a cultural process. That cultural process created the tools in the library, the school, and many more, which enhanced that level so that the population would be educated. We have always been recognized as an educated community, as a community of high culture. That fills us with more pride than being called an oil community or a cattle-raising community. No, those material things exist, of course, and they are important, but our true pride is the pride of belonging to a community, to a town that we have built on foundations that have to do with values and principles. We are at your service to give you more information. We truly regret not having had the time to be able to tell you everything. But today we do want to leave you here simply with an idea that you are in a town that is proud of its history, and we want you to get to know the history. I can recommend literature to you. We can recommend newspapers. We can recommend a lot of information so that you, those who are interested, can learn a little more. And, of course, We are at your service for any questions, for any inquiries, for any additional information you may require. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, for giving us the possibility to talk with you, and to reiterate that you are welcome in this land, and that we appreciate the interest you have shown in this type of activity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you.